From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
See you, button.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Beres here on a Monday. Good show on tap for you for the next hour. You're invited to join in the conversation. We'll get the phone number up for you here in just a moment, 737-7587. But a lot to talk about with our guest this morning, and we're really glad to have him on to talk about various things happening with regard to how we handle situations here, legalities, in the city of Nashville. Everything from how we handle folks with outstanding warrants to how we handle juvenile crime to some high-profile cases. In fact, something that's happening this morning that I'll allow him to clarify about what he sees happening there. And we'll open up the phone lines. But this, in my opinion, in any municipality in the state, the most powerful person in that community is not the sheriff, it's not the police chief, it is the district attorney. Because, as I always say, he has the power to take your freedom away or to allow you to keep it, depending on the circumstance. And with us, joining us in Davidson County, the most powerful man, that would be Glenn Funk. Do you agree or disagree with me on that?
Well, the district attorney's office is a very powerful office. And essentially we have the power to dismiss a case. We've got a power to bring the full force of the state against someone who has committed some kind of heinous crime where the person might need to be incapacitated because they're a danger to the community. So, yes, it's a very powerful position.
Very powerful. Elected, you answer to the electorate.
That's
correct.
how
it works out. Well, thank you for coming on. It's always good having you. I know how busy you are. Real quick, just off the top, it's something that we've reported, the Andrew Delkey case. You're here, and the hearing's at 9 o'clock, so I guess you won't be going to this. Explain to us, from your perspective, what this is all about. As I've said in our morning report, I don't know if it's administrative or not, but nothing's really going to change. He signed a waiver on this plea deal, no parole for him. He's going to serve the time he agreed to. That's not changing this morning, is it?
That's not changing. Yeah, what happened was when we went to court in July, he agreed to waive any parole consideration and just serve his sentence. The legislature, as part of Governor Lee's criminal justice reform package, passed a law that said anybody who's eligible for a parole hearing needs to be scheduled for a parole hearing. It was already happening, but now it's codified. And then a judge in October determined that anybody who's scheduled to have a hearing really needs to actually have a hearing docketed. Okay, that's a little bit of a change. And so in December, they scheduled Andrew Delkey for a parole hearing for January 10th, today. He'd already waived any consideration for parole. And so his lawyer started communicating with the parole board and letting them know, hey, he's already waived this. I started communicating with the parole board as soon as I saw that it was docketed. And what the parole board said was, all right, we'll go ahead and get him to sign a waiver in front of his institutional parole officer, which he did last week. He could have just stayed in his cell today. Instead, they're going to have a monitor go up to the floor on his cell, and he will, over a screen, just affirm that he did a waiver in court and a waiver last week. And then they'll just decline him and have him serve the balance of his sentence. If I've gotten in writing last week from the parole board, if anything other than that were to happen, which it's not, but if anything other than that were to happen, then nothing would happen today. It would just be redocketed at some point in the future. So today's appearance is not going to be for a parole hearing, and I'm 100% sure that Andrew Delkey will just serve the balance of his sentence.
Yeah, and his attorney, David Rabin, told me as much. There's no thinking that there's anything different going to happen. Just to recap that for folks, of course, we covered all the circumstances, but the plea deal was 3 years, correct? And under the sentencing guidelines, based on good behavior and everything, the state sentencing guidelines, he would be expected to be released likely sometime, maybe around this time, near the end of this year?
It's all up to the sheriff how much behavior credits he gives to Mr. Delkey. He can earn, it was my understanding, up to 50%. So he would get out around this time next year.
15 or 16 months served.
And well, it should be 18 to 20 months served, but could be a little bit more, but probably right around there. So around this time next year.
And just the last point, of course, as you know, the Delkey family, or rather the Hambrick family, was upset with the deal as it played out. But you even wrote a letter on behalf of Hambricks. They want to attend this appearance this morning. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, my office stays in contact with Ms. Hambrick, our victim witness coordinator, Mackenzie Britt. Reaches out to her frequently. If Ms. Hambrick has an issue, then she calls our office. In fact, we helped her get some of her son's effects, some money that he had in his pocket, things like that, after the case was over. When this got docketed, we reached out to her. We have informed her through every one of our conversations that what exactly is happening, what's going to be happening this morning. I've even shared all the emails that I've had back and forth with the parole board with her lawyer, Joy Kimbrough. She expressed a desire to make sure that she could be present under the victim's rights of the Tennessee Constitution. It's my opinion that even though this is a perfunctory administrative matter, she would have a right to be present. And so I wrote a letter to the sheriff last week and said, please make accommodations for her to be able to be present. It'll be a 6x8 room with a parole hearing officer and a laptop computer with a video monitor on it. And Mr. Delkey will come out, he'll affirm his waiver, he'll be informed that the recommendation is decline parole, serve the balance of the sentence, and that'll be it. But anytime that there's anything that has to do with this case, Ms. Hambrick deserves to be able to be present for that. Yeah,
my understanding is the sheriff's going to accommodate her one way or the other. So she'll be there outside the room or maybe inside. You're right, it's going to be a very small room. The media is going to have a pool camera outside with a monitor, and we'll be waiting in the lobby maybe if folks come out and want to say something to us.
When I let Sheriff Hall know, his response was immediate. We'll make sure to make any accommodation that she needs.
Okay, and last point just on this case then. After today, I mean, nothing more is going to change. I mean, you know that, Vicki Hambrick may continue to express her displeasure with the way things played out, but we don't anticipate anything changing moving forward from here in this case. I mean, it is what it is. As you just said, he'll serve out his sentence and that'll be the end of it.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on from that.
And he'll be released at some point, but he'll be a convicted felon for the rest of his life, and he won't be able to be a police officer anymore. So, I mean, there are some serious collateral consequences beyond the severe sanction of incarceration.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we've got other things we want to talk about. As I said this morning, 737-7587. You can sit back and listen, or it can be intimidating calling in and talking to a DA, but don't be. Okay, he's sitting here with me. You can call in and talk if you'd like, but the lines are open. We did several stories on this. How many weeks ago was it? The Safe Surrender program, and I've seen this done before, I guess, in certain circumstances, but explain again how it played out. 33,000, I guess, outstanding warrants here in Davidson County, and you set something up where you let folks know who had those that they could show up at a church and come in and kind of say, I have this warrant, and that you would do it if they did this with consideration. Right.
This was actually the brainchild of the Department of Justice some 15 years ago. And a number of cities did an Operation Safe Surrender where people with outstanding warrants could turn themselves in on that warrant in a safe way, because anytime that a warrant is served, there's threat to the officer, there's a threat to the individual who's being arrested. And what Nashville has done is done it in a way where it's at a church, where clergy are involved, making sure that everything is safe, making sure that everything is run appropriately. We did this a few years ago in 2015, and we were able to clear up 133 outstanding warrants. Many of those folks were able to actually plead guilty and get time served right there on the spot, where they wouldn't have to keep coming back to court. Some cases were actually dismissed, even at that one 7 years ago. But then the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden courts were closed for a number of months, and then they were limiting their dockets, and we had a situation where a lot of people really didn't know when their next court date was, or maybe no one had really communicated with them, or maybe they had just lapsed because the court date had been moved around so many times. And so we've ended up in a position where we've got 33,000 outstanding warrants.
And you get the sense these weren't people necessarily, maybe some of them, that were running and hiding and trying to avoid the warrant. For whatever reason, it just didn't get taken care of.
The vast majority of these are people who are not trying to avoid the process, but people who either fell through the cracks, or because they were irresponsible, or because the court system was just confusing, did not show up for court.
Okay, some may not have even known they had a warrant out on them.
Some might not.
And again, let's clarify too, and I'll let you finish your thought. Sorry to interrupt you there, but these are not violent offenders. Most of the types of warrants we're talking about are what? The
vast majority of these are nonviolent offenses. They're either driving on a road license, they're simple possession of marijuana, they're criminal trespass, they're low-level nonviolent misdemeanors. And so that's a real problem, because if you've got an outstanding warrant and you're driving down the street and maybe you're going 35 into 25 and you get pulled over, maybe you're on the way to the grocery store to get something for your family. Well, instead of getting to the grocery store and coming back, oh, well, sir, not only do you have the speeding ticket, but you've got an outstanding warrant for your arrest because you missed court last year. And then that person has to get transported down to jail, will either sit in jail for 24 hours or have to make a bond and have to come back to court. It's a real problem, and we identified that problem. And so what we are doing as the district attorney's office is trying to reduce those numbers of outstanding warrants that are, a lot of them COVID related, because of the changes in the way that the dockets have been affected. So the first thing we did was we said, let's get the entire criminal justice system together to try to have an Operation Safe Surrender, where some of these folks can actually have their cases dismissed and expunged on the spot. Some people can actually clear their cases up by working out some time served plea, and some folks, let's just get them in and give them a new court date, but get the arrest warrant out of the system, where they just are back in the system and they've got a new court date to come back to court. So Michael Joyner in our office worked with the police department, with the sheriff's department, with the criminal court clerk, the general sessions judges, the criminal court judge, the public defender. We had some private defense attorneys go, and then my office fully staffed it as well.
That's awesome.
And we were able to work out over 250 people.
Is this the first time you've done this?
This is the first time we've done this in 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years.
But now that we've done this and it was successful, we're going to try to see if we can't make this an annual event.
I was going to say, and how did the word get out? I assume the media, I guess, did some. You contacted attorneys so they could let their...
We contacted attorneys, the media was very helpful, and we let the pastors know as well, and so that they could tell their congregation, so that anybody in their congregation who might even know somebody, whether it's the person in the congregation or whether it's a friend or family member. One of the things that was really great was we based our staffing on what had happened 7 years ago, but we were hoping there would be even more, so we had a few extra people. But when we arrived on that Friday morning, because we did this on a Friday and a Saturday in December, when we arrived there on Friday morning, there were 25 people already waiting in line to do this, and the majority of them were Hispanic. And so very quickly we called 3 or 4 members of the district attorney's office who are native Spanish speakers,
bilingual,
and got a court interpreter, got somebody from the clerk's office who spoke Spanish, got somebody from the public defender's office that spoke Spanish. And so we had a large influx of some Hispanic members of our community who were able to go through this process in numbers far greater than we had 7 or 8 years ago.
We have to take a break on that. I want to talk a little more on that, as well as the idea of doing it with the church. I mean, talk about a safe place to go. A place, and the pastors are there, and so you know it's going to be a safe interaction. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with District Attorney General Glenn Funk here in Davidson County. Take some phone calls, a lot more to talk with him about right after this. Stay with us.